Hello, welcome to the Caches and Queues workshop. So in this workshop, we will be playing with a couple technologies, including using Express as a web server and using Redis as an in-memory data store. Um, so there's going to be a couple parts. The first part, just setting up things and getting a test run at some of the technologies. And then in stages, doing something a little bit more complex, finally doing something much more difficult on your own. And I'll walk you through several of these steps and you'll have the chance to work through this. So the first thing that I did was I initialized a VM for that that has Redis on it, and also will have the 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 third part of the workshop. We're going to be running a server on there. Anyways, let's first start with talking about Redis. So Redis is, like I mentioned, an in-memory data store. And really in this workshop, we only touch upon a really small part of the capabilities that Redis has. In later workshops, like the monitoring workshop, you'll get to play with some of the publish subscribe features that it has. But really the simplest thing that you can think of as Redis is a key value store. So if you think about what this would look like in Node.js, you could use this Redis package to make a connection to the Redis server. And then you can use the client to call things like set this key with this value and retrieve it, right? So really trivial sort of stuff. But I also want to show you the Redis CLI version of doing this, because it's actually pretty convenient just to play around in Redis and look at what's going on. So when I do this, I'm connected into the Redis server and I can start issuing commands, and it has auto completion, right? So you could see set, and then it tells me that I could do a key. So I'm going to do hello, and I'm going to give it a value, Redis. So enter that, and it will just give me a response, okay. But if I say get hello, it's going to tell me Redis, right? So there's all sorts of different commands you can do here, including making lists and being able to use more sophisticated hash maps, etc. But for our purposes, this is pretty good. And you could see that we basically can do the same thing here. So I could run this script, and you can see that it was able to set hello Redis and then retrieve it. All right, but in case you didn't believe me, I'm going to change this to hello world, run it again and see what happens. Okay, and you can see that it set the key and it's now hello world. Okay, cool. All right, so that tells us, okay, Redis is working okay, so that's good. So the next thing I want to show you is using an Expressword server. So Express is pretty convenient in terms of it only takes a couple lines of code to set up a server and get started with doing stuff. But I want to show you what I think is the heart of Express is this concept of routes. And you see that here where you see it says app.get, and then it has a URL pattern and then a handler function. And so what basically happens is Express is going to listen to request and map it to this function if it matches this URL. And then the function will simply write back to the response body, and think back to the REST workshops that we've done. This basically literally means writing to that object that sent back that text document. And then that's rendered in the browser, right? And we can do all sorts of stuff. You can write this as HTML, you can render JSON, etc. So we'll play more with that. But the main idea is it's very easy to send, stand up a web server in Node.js. So let's exit out of this client, and I'm going to change into this folder called basics. All right, never mind. I need to get out of the server. So I'm going to change into basics. And you can see all this stuff here. I'm going to do npm install. And I'm going to start this server. All right, and you can see this is just the same code here running. And I'm going to reload. And you can see there's a message, hello world, right? And you can view the same thing in the browser, right? So that's cool. That's Express, right? So that's just enough to get us going. So I did Control C to close this out so that we don't have anything blocking that. And I'm going to move on to part 2 because I want to have you do a little bit more advanced stuff. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our basics directory here. And I'm going to run a different command. I'm going to run npx nodemon and index. And what nodemon is going to do is it's actually going to be watching all the JavaScript files in this directory and looking for changes to it. And if that happens, then it's going to reload. And let me show you what that I mean by that. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to add a new route. And I'm just going to say just test for now. And it's the request and the response. And I'm using the shorthand version of functions. And I'm just going to write something real quick. Response send hi. Okay. So I create that. And you can see that it is reloading this file because this file had changed. So that's going to be very useful for you to kind of mess with this and be able to have that server up and running. And so, for example, right now I can actually try hitting that endpoint by just changing this and seeing if I can hit high. It says it could not hit high. Oh, that's because I called it test. Okay, well, that makes sense. So change it to test, and then you see high. Okay, so this gets you up and running, but let's look at what we actually want to do. So what we want to do for your first task is implement a new route called day of the week. All right, so this is going to be really simple. It's just going to return, say today is Friday, then that should be 4 or 5, depending on how it indexes it. I think 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let day of week equal new date and get day. Okay, now here's an interesting thing. I'm going to go ahead and show you this. Just based on how the send thing works, it's actually not going to like this. So I'm going to change this back to day of week. It's a little stuck. Oh, running there. All right, so that was a little bit messy, but the reason you don't want to do that was because it's actually going to be a number and it thinks that you're using an old version, a deprecated version of sending status, and it wants you to use a string instead. But the problem is because that throws an exception, you never send a response and it just hangs. And then you have to kind of hunt down and kill that process, which is not pretty. But yeah, so don't do that. So instead, you want to do something. You could do get style toString. That would work. We do that. Then you can see 5. Okay, so I got day of the week is 5. Cool. All right. So the next thing that I want you to play with is something a little bit more sophisticated. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a simple self-destruct message service. So what's going to basically happen is you're going to send a secret message by posting it to the server, and it's going to return back a retrieval link. Then what will happen is when your goal is when someone reads that message, it will expire and and within 10 seconds be destroyed, right? So it's such that if you were to make a request and sleep again, that you would see that it says that it's going to be self-destructing in 7 seconds and eventually be gone. And the way that we're going to do that is we're actually going to use Redis to help us store this message. And we're going to use the key expiration feature to help us do that. All right, so let's walk through doing that. So I am going to first make the 2 endpoints just so that we have those available. So I'm going to do, so again, routes, then get, and the first one is tape, where, actually, so this is wrong. This should be post because the method is post. So post, request, send. I'll just put in a stub for now. Borrow this. This is going to be a get, and it's going to be for read. And it will have with it a ID. All right, so this is a special syntax that you can use in Express that will tell you that will allow you to specify parameters and then refer to it. And the way that we can get this back out, so that we can go ahead and print it here. So trying to do a $sign, sorry. All right, so it's going to be the request params ID, because this was part of the request body or headers. And so I'll just say something like received ID this, okay. So that looks okay for just 2 dummy endpoints. And let me go ahead and, so I should just be able to run this, that shouldn't. So, okay, so it just returns okay, that's hard, what you would expect. But I'm going to go ahead and call the other one. So HTTP localhost, and then read, and then just pass in a dummy value, and hopefully I will see, yes, received ID dummy, right? So you can see how that is retrieved. So, okay, cool. So we have that basics part set up, but the next thing that we want to do is actually store the stuff in Redis, right? So what I'm going to do is so one thing I'm missing here is the message, because I haven't received that. And that's going to be received as part of the body. Okay, so that's going to be in the request body. And if it's encoded as JSON, I think that will already be available, but let's go ahead and confirm that. Okay, so I saved that file. I'm going to run this request. Okay, it doesn't have property undefined. Let's go ahead and print out the body and see how that looks like. Undefined. Okay, request, post, request. All right, let me double check I'm getting this from the right location. All right, 2 different fun issues. One, there was a missing setup that I needed, which is this middleware for parsing the body. So this makes it easier for there to be a request body as part of the Express route. And that was missing, so that field just wasn't populated. Okay, so this is here now, so that there's something that parses the response body, good. This second is a Windows specific thing of where it doesn't like single quotes in passing along the JSON in this curl request. So in this case, what I did was use double quotes and then escaped the double quote in here. So if you're using Windows, you'd probably have to do something similar to send this request. Good times. All right, but what you can see is I have this all set up so that I run that, I run this, and I can get, so I have my message here. All right, so my goal is I want to do two things. One, I want to store this in Redis, and I want to generate a new key that will help me do this. So let me go ahead and import this library up here, which will provide a nice little random ID for me. So I'm gonna have that as my key, and I'm going to use Redis, or the client of Redis, and I'm gonna use the get function, and I'm gonna set function key value, which is gonna be the request body message, and then I'm gonna have a function that will error status that gets returned. And then when I get response, then I'll say received message, and then I'll say stored, or, and then actually let's meet the spec. So we should just say success true is true. So okay, so if that status is okay, then that should be true. And then the other part that we want is we want to say link, and this is actually all a JSON object. Okay, so reply equals object, and then reply dot success equals status equals okay, and reply dot link equals key with the HTTP appended. So let's go ahead and do that, or prepended. Post my port number, read, and then the key. Okay. So we're just going to send. So I believe there's a JSON that you can send reply. All right, so let's double check what I have here. So a new key, a client call, and then a reply. Okay. All right, let's just try it, see if that works. So, all right, that sort of looks like it works. So it says it was true, and it has a link with this URL. And that looks like that should be in Redis. Now, my next part that I want to do is I want to be able to read that value in Redis, right? So what I'm going to do is something similar, but this time using get. So I'm going to get the request params ID, read that key, and then I'm going to have a function that will return the value. All right, and what I want to do is, let's look at my spec. I want to print out the message and then the time to live. All right, and this is also an object reply. So let reply equal this. And let's just focus on the message initially, and then we'll get the time to live part to work. So reply dot message equals value, and then we're gonna send back that JSON. Okay, so let's save this. right, and then here's the link here. So I can borrow this. And then just use this to make that call. Okay. So it looks like I made the call, but didn't quite find anything. All right. So let's debug that. All right, that looks like just a copy paste bug. It was missing the last two E's of the string. All right, so you can see that it retrieved that message from the thing, and it actually just go straight into here and confirm right in the Redis CLI that that message is there. So that's pretty useful. All right. So the thing that I want to do is I want to finish this. I want to do two things. I want to expire the key when it's read. So when it's read, I want to go ahead and start its expiration. So this, I'm going to use the expire method, and I'm going to give it a key, which is the params, the ID, and 10 seconds is the thing I want to do. And then I want to use the client TL, the time to live function. So again, the key, and this will return back the time to live of that key. And then I'm just going to add on to my reply what the time is. All right. All right. There's a little complication here, but let's deal with that later. Okay. So reply TTL equals this message will self-destruct in TTL seconds. All right, so that sort of works, but you might notice that there's a little bit of a logic flaw here. Okay, so this works. The main problem is I'm going to be calling this each time. So I sort of need a little logic check here. Oh, actually, it seems like it might treat that as a one-time thing. Okay, so that's actually kind of cool. All right, so that's what I thought. I don't have to change this. So if you, once you set an expiration date, if you reset the expiration date, like it will ignore that. It will use the initial expire call. So if I call this again, you can see that this message has already expired, and you can see actually how long it has expired. So, okay, I think it stops at negative countdown. But let's try that again just to make sure that that's all working. So I'm going to get this. Here's a new message. I'm going to read it from here. Okay, 10 seconds. 10 seconds. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we are seeing that thing. So if I wait 10 seconds, it will expire. Okay, but it is seeming to renew. Okay, that makes sense. So if I waited longer than 10 seconds, then it has it. All right, so to patch that, let me think about that for a second. All right, I think I found a simple fix. So reading up on the specs real quick, if the time to live is -1, that means that there is no expiration date. If it is -2, that means the key no longer exists, which happens when it gets expired. So what we could just simply do is check that if we request the time to live, and it's -1, then let's go ahead and set expiration, which should be a one-time thing. And if it does get expired, then that will no longer be true, and then this will return null. Or you could return a different message. But let's do this and try that again. So we're going to make a new message. We're going to read from it. Okay. Okay, that's a tiny bug, but that's closer to what we want. So what essentially happens is the very first time that we read from it, the this time is technically -1, so it printed that. But on the subsequent calls, then it actually prints out the time to live. And so you could, I mean, as a dumb hack, just put this to 10 and make it do what we want. You probably want something cleaner than that. One more time. All right, 10 seconds, 7 seconds, 6 seconds, 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, 1, 0, and it's gone. Okay, so that is a working self-destruct service. So that was pretty cool. And this gives you a pretty good feel for kind of setting up routes and using some of Redis's operations. So the part I want you to explore mostly on your own is this part. So this part's going to be a little bit tricky, but let me introduce you to the main idea. So the main idea is that there is a, what is it on? I don't think it's started yet. Okay. So there's going to be a web server that is running a service called Meow.io. And the Meow.io is pretty simple. It basically just lists a bunch of cat facts and that have votes on them. And it will just show pictures that are uploaded. So it's a pretty simple thing. The one thing is a little bit weird, and there's a couple reasons why I'm doing this, but we're going to be doing this inside the VM itself. And so all these commands here are actually connected to the Meow IO VM already. So if we run this, that would clone it. I've already done that. And here's a terminal that's in it. So if I wanted to set up the app, I would do npm install. Sorry, not this one, not in it. Npm install. Then I'm going to do no data init.js. And then what that's going to do is, okay, well, I already have this created, so that's why that doesn't work. But I already have a database set up. But if you haven't done that for the first time, it's going to create the database for you. And then using npm start is going to spawn the Meow IO site. Okay, so it looks like probably me doing that database command messed up stuff. So let's fix that. Okay, so I just deleted the database so I can just rerun that initialization step again. And then now I'm going to run npm start. And I can run the status again just to check. Okay, looks like it hasn't crashed yet. Good. Okay, so still not alive. What's going on? All right, let's check. All right, so I ran PM2 logs, and it can give me output of the program I was trying to run. And you get to see that there was a small error where I was missing an async when I was removing some code. So that didn't start back up, but patching that up real quick, then I can start things again. And here you have it, now IO. And you can see that there's no pictures yet because nothing has been uploaded. And then here's all these cat facts. So let me show you one thing that I've done here. I'm actually using the code remote SSH plugin or extension that will let you can see right here where you just search for remote SSH. This is installed. And what's neat about it is it'll actually let you, if you first add an SSH host and then SSH into, you basically use the plugin to open up a connection to it, it'll actually open up this folder and let you play with that code. So it's kind of an interesting way to edit the code. You could also just use Vim if you really wanted to. That's not that big of a deal. But here's all the stuff that I have. And just to look at the code real quick, the main idea is something similar where you have this Express server that sets up stuff. And then all the routes that you would probably play with are here, which are just doing things like loading up the index or receiving a file for upload. And then there is also, what else is relevant? Data, DB. So here are some functions for reading from the database. And so at some point, you'll also modify these so that you can take advantage of connecting to Redis. So let me just walk you through the high level picture of what I would like you to do. So I would like you to do 3 tasks that involve basically trying to use things like caches and queues to help us manage the work, just kind of the workflow of the application. And there's a couple of different things going on. So the first one is when you saw that cat fact calculation and you look at the code, it is basically using pulling all the votes that is sorted and then just taking the top 100. And every time you load the page, it is getting this. And so what I would like you to do is to be able to take this calculation and move it out and then do something like this, of where you're basically doing something like let facts equal cache facts for this. And then what I want you to do is pull make a Redis connection. To my local host because I'm already on the machine. Oh, in fact, that's already here. So this uncomment this. And then you're going to want to basically do client.get some sort of key. You can call it whatever you want, like front page facts. And you're going to want to do something like this, where if this, so this is not right, this is okay. So retrieving from Redis the cache facts from this key, you're going to want to check if that's null, then it's going to just get it from the database and set the facts. And then you just want to basically set this. There is one thing that you're going to have to do, though, that's not going to quite work. You're going to quickly figure out that you can't just store this raw JSON or data like a list into Redis like that. You're going to have to do something else. I'll let you figure that out. It's surprisingly simple, but that's kind of like the high level of how you're going to want to set this up. So play with that. And then the next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to run this script, which is just a simple curl script that is going to be pooling that page, and it's going to keep hitting it and hitting it. And I've done this a couple times, but surprisingly, when I do this on the VM, this took me 2 minutes to run when I didn't cache. And when I did cache it, it took me 20 seconds to run that. So this is kind of like a 10x or order of magnitude difference in performance. So that was pretty cool to see that. And note that we are making an explicit trade-off between availability and consistency, because the displayed data will always be potentially 10 seconds behind what the real score might be if there were changes to the vote database. And once we've done that, then we're going to do something similar, but instead of storing things kind of in a cached manner, what we're going to actually do is store things in sort of using like a list. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use, instead of a key value, we're going to use one of Redis's list functionalities, which lets you kind of push things into a key to store the 5 most recent uploads to the database, right? And so you could kind of see, I believe this should just go ahead and work out of the box. So if I run this, I am uploading those 3 files, and that looks okay. And I refresh this, then you'll see this here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a small change of where, instead of reading from the database on each call, so if we go back to here, you see how it's reading DB recent cats. We're going to change that call so that it will read from Redis itself. And the way that you're going to have to make that change is you're going to have to jump into the data part. So you're going to have to go here, and when the cats are uploaded, instead of writing, you say in addition to writing to a database, you also want to store it in the Redis recent list. And finally, the last part is going to be a little bit more tricky, but this basically handles the scenario of, imagine you had a larger volume of uploads, and your writing to the database was taking longer than you can handle. And so this is basically this implementing this idea of you're writing to Redis first. So you're writing all the uploads in memory to Redis, and then you're using a kind of internal thread, which you could just implement with a simple set interval timer to slowly pop out the images. So this is basically implementing the queue from Redis and saving it in the database. So you're basically draining this queue. And by doing this, I'm not sure if you'll see performance differences, but you will basically make this potentially more scalable in practice, because it would be easier to have more in-memory stuff to just kind of handle, like the fast writes, and then push off to a database in a longer term, more persistent manner. So that's the main idea for the rest of the workshop. And so this is going to be a bulk of the homework, is doing these 3 tasks yourself, in addition to completing the things before this. So this is usually pretty fun for people to do. But as you saw, even when I was trying to run through some of the stuff, you're going to have to debug it and try your best to understand what's going on. And of course, get help from Discord. All right, good luck with this.